How's it going, guys? My name is Dom, and today I'm going to be showing you how to create a text typing effect with JavaScript. Now, I'm going to refresh the page here, and this is what we're going to be creating in today's video from scratch. It is really easy to do, and you can, of course, apply this to any element on your page, and you can also choose to decrease or increase the speed at which the text is rendered. So this here might be useful for things like chatbots or anything where you want to mimic somebody actually typing text on the screen. So let's go inside this tab right here and, of course, begin from scratch to create what I just showed you. Now, going inside VS Code, I've got this index.html. I've just set up some default styles. This here is completely up to you if you want to copy this now or just, use your own styles for the text. And of course, I've also got a div down here with a class of text, which of course is the div in which we are going to be populating in today's video. So the first step in achieving this effect is going to be to get a reference to the actual div to populate. So let's say const div equal to document.querySelector and pass through here a class of text just like that. So now, of course, I've got this div within JavaScript referenced, and I'm also going to make a second constant to hold the text to display. I'm just going to copy and paste what I showed you in the example at the beginning. So I'll just go here and just copy all of this, and we can display the exact same text, okay? Cool. So how is this going to work? How do we get this to render in a text typing effect? So we're going to take advantage of recursive functions. Now, before you click away, trust me, it's not going to be too complicated. I'm going to talk you through how it's going to work recursively. So let's make a new function here called text typing effect. Now, the idea is whenever we call this function, it is going to display the text which we pass in within the element. So we're going to need a couple of arguments. Firstly, we need to provide the element to have the effect on, as well as the text itself to display. The last argument here is going to be the current index. In other words, which character inside the text do we actually want to render next? I'm going to call this argument or this parameter I equal to 0 by default. So basically, when you want to call this function normally, you just say text typing effect, pass in the element, pass in the text, and you leave the last argument blank, and it's going to work perfectly fine. So let's call the function right now. So text typing effect, pass in the div, and pass in the text. Very straightforward. Now, the first step within this function is going to be to take this last argument, and then we're going to render that character on the screen. So I'll say here elements.textContent plus equals. So this just means, of course, appends to the existing text within the div. We're going to say plus equals and then say text at the index of I. So in this first instance, we're going to pass through 0 as I, as is the default. And it's going to get the first character at index 0, then render it out on the screen. I'll save this, go back in the browser, and we get capital T right there. If I was to provide an index of something else, such as, let's do 8 as an example, I'll save this, go back in the browser. We get H. So if I go back in VS Code, we can see we get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So H is the 8th index within the string. So that's how this is going to work. Now, you may already be thinking how this is going to work recursively, because essentially we want to call this function for every single character within the string. So that's how this solution is going to work. So let's hop down here, and we are going to then call the function again and increment the index. So text typing effect, we're going to pass through once again the elements and the text, just like we did previously. Then we're going to say I plus 1. So the difference here is, of course, now we're actually providing an index. So we get the current index of, let's put this back to 0. So I'll get rid of that down there. So we're saying 0, render out the first character, then render out the second character. Then within here, render out the next character. So you can see how it's recursively being called, and eventually it's going to render out the entire string. So I'll save this, go back in the browser, and we get the entire string rendered out. as well as a bunch of undefines. Now, we can see here we've reached an error which says maximum call stack size exceeded because we are simply calling this function infinitely. And we need to, of course, put a base condition to stop the execution of the recursive function. What is that base condition? Well, it's going to be if we've reached the end of the string, then stop. How do we check that? We just say if I is equal to text.length -1. So, of course, the indexes are going to be one less than the length of the string. So this checks if we've reached the end of the string. Then we're going to say here return. And of course, a single return statement is going to stop the execution of the function. Let's save this, go back in the browser, and now it stops at the end and we get no more errors. So now a refresh, of course, the whole thing comes out immediately. How do we now make this happen incrementally with that little pause per character? This right here is going to be really straightforward, guys. Let's go back in VS Code. We're going to use set timeout. So down here, when we actually call the function again, we're going to wait X amounts of milliseconds. In this case here, 50. Let's say set timeout. Within here, pass in an arrow function so we can actually provide some arguments in an elegant way. We're going to say text typing effect, just like this, and get rid of this line, then put a comma and say 50. So every 50 milliseconds, we're going to run this line of code to, of course, re-render the next character. Save this back in the browser, and we can see we get the effect working perfectly fine. Now, there is one small problem here, and that is if I go back in here, if I was to call this twice, or should I say if I wait, so let's go back in the browser here. If I wait till it finishes, then I'm going to call it again. So I'll say text typing effects. I'll pass in here the div and the text. We can see it just keeps on going at the end because, of course, we simply plus equals to append to the existing string. So to prevent that from happening, we can put a quick prevention condition. We can say if the index is equal to 0, so basically if you're starting from scratch again or from the beginning, just say elements.textContent is equal to an empty string, and it's going to clear the string or clear the elements before re-rendering. And now, of course, if I run it again, it's going to restart the whole process. So that is how to create a text typing effect with HTML and JavaScript. If you guys learned something in today's video, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.